Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, aka PD Beats.
Hello and welcome to the Popternative podcast. This is the podcast where we have digital discussions, the worlds of pop culture, TV, film, social media, sports, everything really. As always, I'm your host, Peter Remoliotis. On Twitter, it goes PD Beats. And today we're going to be talking about a little show they like to call Game of Thrones. And we are speaking to an actor. You'll recognize him as Syrio Forel in season 1 of Game of Thrones. We're with Miltos Yerolemou. Miltos, welcome to Popternative.
It's a pleasure to be here. It took a little while, but I'm here.
No, you're here, and we're really, really happy. I know it's very busy right now, in general for you, doing the conventions as well. But when did you kind of decide that you wanted to be a storyteller, Miltos?
That's a good question, because I didn't grow up with with that kind of thing in my head of wanting to be an actor, and I didn't. Even when I was a teenager, I didn't want to be an actor. It just wasn't one of those things that I thought was a thing that anyone could do. I thought it was what other people did and not Greeks like me. So I grew up I was born in London. My parents had literally just arrived, sailing from Cyprus to Southampton. It was 1968. And my parents, they were working. My dad worked in a restaurant. My dad eventually had his own restaurant in Eastbourne on the south coast of the UK. And, that's what I was supposed to do. That was my inheritance. That was what I was going to do. And although I did start working there so early, around the age of 11, that by the time I got to 18, I was ready to retire from catering completely. I'm sure you can imagine, anyone who's worked in catering can imagine that. But I wasn't very academic. For whatever reason, I didn't feel like I could fit in at school. I was a bit, I felt a little bit isolated. I thought I wasn't very bright. Who knows the reasons, really? But I didn't really enjoy school. But one thing allowed me to connect with school, and that was doing school drama. I think the very first thing I ever did at the age of 9 was a play with no words, just set to music, called The Clockwork Policeman. And it was kind of like a mime. It was kind of like a dance as well. And what's really interesting is that I've always loved dancing. I never trained exclusively or extensively, but I was very lucky to work with fantastic choreographers. So I had a natural aptitude. People could tell me a sequence of moves and I could reproduce them, without too much effort. So that also was something that immediately connected with me. And I think there was also another element. I really, really remember as a child my mother telling me stories. I really remember her not reading from books, but just literally sitting in bed with me and telling me stories. And those things have a very profound effect on you. And the fact that I was aware of her creating these stories from her imagination, I'm sure had a very profound impact on my subconscious. So it was a mixture of many, many different things. I had no intention of studying drama. I wanted to do law because that's what I thought I should do. But ultimately, a friend of mine intervened and said, "Listen, I don't think you're going to do very, very well if you go and study law. You're not the most academic kid, but do something you love. Do something. If you're going to go away and study for 3 years, at least do something that you really love, because you might be good at it." And then I did a 3-year performing arts degree, and I concentrated on directing. Actually, I wouldn't really even consider myself a very good actor when I was younger, but I think I kind of got better with age and experience. Um, yeah, so that's kind of a very long-winded explanation of how I became an actor.
And no, for sure. And I think it's important to also mention that that's where a lot of people learn their craft, the theater, before they kind of went on the big screen. I mean, the theater's where they learn their craft, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I loved performing. Uh, as I've got older, I think I've got more nervous about performing. I think I've got more self-conscious, more experience, but more self-consciousness. But when I was a kid, I would do anything. And also, I grew up on musicals, so the things that we did, I was very lucky to have an English teacher who ran his own theatre companies, and we would do big scale productions of West Side Story and Cabaret and The Boyfriend, the traditional run of the mill musicals. And so before I studied drama, that was what my experience was. So I danced and I sang and I acted. Um, and and it was only when I went and did a very experimental theatre degree that I realized just the possibilities of what theatre can do.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never been what you would consider someone who is looking to do, I don't know. I mean, I hate the word straight plays. There's no really such a thing, but I think you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
The modern classics. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure.
I've always devised shows. I've always worked in collaboration with people. I've always done original work, slightly avant-garde. And those are the artists that I love the most, the people who are always pushing the boundaries as to how to tell stories.
No, absolutely. So we're going to talk about it now. You were featured on season 1 of arguably the biggest show on the planet, which is Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I mean,
No.
I think it is. So your character was an interesting character because it was one of those kind of voice of reason, kind of nuggets of wisdom type characters that impacts such an important character down the road for the show, in Arya. So have you ever kind of thought about, Syrio Forel is a big reason why Arya is the character she is today? Like, does that ever come to your mind a lot?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it really does. He reminds me of those tropes you get in storytelling of the unconventional teacher who starts the story of the protagonist that we're going to be following. You get it with Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid. You get it with Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars and Luke Skywalker. And you get it with Arya Stark and Syrio Forel. These people appear in these protagonists' lives, and kind of they're the starting point, the kind of the springboard to their story. And usually they don't stick around very long, but they impart a certain seed which kind of grows, and that definitely felt like the role of Syrio Forel, because in the books it's very clear that Arya throughout the books repeats those mantras that Syrio teaches her right at the beginning. She repeats them over and over. They run in her mind regularly and constantly, and so form the way that she sees the world. And so, with her, I always think about, like, Jaqen teaches her the magic, the kind of magic of the assassin, the kind of that thing that is slightly supernatural. You don't really know where it comes from and what it really is, but there's a kind of mysticism there. Syrio teaches her the literal sword fighting skills, and the Hound teaches her her badass attitude. I always think that those three things are what make Arya Stark who she is.
And you're a character in Game of Thrones that has, like, you know, one could argue like a very prominent like catchphrase,
Which doesn't exist in the books. That was created solely for the TV show. And you know, I'm kind of proud that, I mean, David and Dan said to me, they said, you know, in the books, Syrio is talked about a lot, but we don't see the lessons. We have the first one and we have the last one. But we wanted to have a link between those two episodes because you know, just for you know, visual TV storytelling, we needed it. So I was very lucky. They wrote me an extra scene, and what a scene it was. I mean, it was so short but had a lot of impact. And what's interesting is that you probably are aware of the fan theories about you know, the faceless men, and is Syrio one of them? And well, all of that is neither here nor there. But what is very interesting is that I don't think in the books it's ever mentioned that Syrio has a belief in the one deity. You know, the idea of the god of death. You know, the faceless men's idea of it. In the books, he doesn't. But they wrote that scene, and I still swear to God that David and Dan were trolling the fans when they put that scene in, because it seemed to kind of suggest that Syrio believed the same thing as the faceless men, which put him in the same bracket as them in the TV show.
No, absolutely.
Where in the books that isn't the case. That's just a fan theory.
Are you able to give us a little taste of the quote I'm talking about? Are you?
Do you believe in the gods? What, the old and the new? Well, there is only one God, and his name is death. And there is only one thing we say to the god of death: not today.
Chills. You gave me chills. That's awesome. Thank you for doing that. How many times? But how many times is that asked at conventions? That's probably like the staple at conventions, right? For you,
I've written it on people's limbs, and that it's been tattooed onto their bodies. But seriously, though, I'm incredibly humbled because there are people, like, for example, this weekend, this happens all the time, and half the time I don't really know what to do with the information. It's so overwhelming. But there's always, like, this weekend, someone came along and they said that their best friend had just got over cancer. They were in remission, which was fantastic news. But he said that his friend every single day would wake up and look himself in the mirror and say that line to himself every single day. And so his friend came to the convention and had me sign something, a sword, a wooden sword, in fact, for his friend, because, you know, he told me that his friend was incredibly inspired by this thing that I was involved in. I mean, I can't take credit really for that just myself, because it involved, you know, people writing that scene and you know, directing that scene, and I just said those lines. But it's incredibly humbling, and I'm very moved every time I hear a story like that.
And it has to do too with the power of fandom, and also the power of fandom in the age of kind of social media and digital media. We all know it's kind of a double-edged sword, Miltos, but I think one of the good things is the kind of it allows for these like amazing connections and networks to kind of be created at like conventions. It could lead to conventions, like someone tweeting out to you that they're going to meet you at a convention and they have a cool story. Like, it's unbelievable what social media has done.
And also the fact that it's really interesting because we are the storytellers. Like, I like the fact that you begin this podcast about, you know, it's about storytelling. And so, you know, we are the storytellers. We tell these stories and they connect with people. But what's really interesting when you do conventions and when you interact with the fans is that they tell you their story. And that is really, really, it's really interesting. It's really humbling as well, and how we inspire each other.
No, absolutely. It is insane. Talk a little bit about, you know, like when you were kind of working on Game of Thrones and now post Game of Thrones. You know, the last season is currently upon us right now, and it's just been kind of the talk of the town. I'm sure kind of um, the buzz of Game of Thrones, like it goes in waves, but I feel right now it's like really like
It's
going.
peak Game of Thrones because it's literally 4 episodes left. It feels like it's only just started and there's 4 episodes left. And last night's episode was fantastic. I have to say, it was all the feels, man, all the feels. It was really powerful. Congratulations to David and Dan and Brian Cogman and Manuel Sapotnik.
What for you, because there are so many things that people probably love about Game of Thrones. For you specifically, what do you really think hits stride with the audience of Game of Thrones? Is it what it looks like? Is it the stories? Is it the characters? Is there something specific about it that you think really hits stride?
I mean, there's lots of things, but I was thinking about this weekend because obviously whenever you do a con, you get asked a lot of questions and you kind of think about the show a lot. And I thought to myself, what is it that really, really made it so big? We can say it's because it's great writing and it's, it's like high production values and it's, show creators who absolutely know what they're doing and the reason why they're doing it. All of those things are great, and lots of shows have that. But there's something about how deeply emotionally connected we are made to feel with the show. And it's because, so you can always, with good acting and good storytelling, you can emotionally engage your audience. But there's something different with Game of Thrones. It's so unpredictable, and the characters are so well drawn, and there really isn't a small character in Game of Thrones. Everyone has a resonance for one reason and another. But also these people that you fall in love with or hate, you don't know what's going to happen to them. Like, for example, my favorite character at the moment is Jaime Lannister. And he, at the beginning, he was a character that we despised. The very first episode, made you feel incredibly like, what, who, what? And then, his story arc has been the most interesting. He's had the furthest to travel. And last night's episode felt like, there you have it. That him knighting Brienne is like, you feel like you've come a long way with that character. And that doesn't happen very often with shows because most of the time we understand who these characters are from the very beginning and they always stay the same. So however emotionally invested we are, it's never as much as what happens in Game of Thrones, where they literally put you through the ringer. And I think maybe that has had an effect of why it's had such a powerful effect.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. It's just been insane, and it just continues to get bigger and bigger. And it's like everyone, all that they're talking about, whether at Easter dinner is Game of Thrones or at work is Game of Thrones, and it's not going to stop. So,
That's true.
Uh,
and also people watch it together.
Mm-hmm. The community aspect of things.
Yeah, we're living at a time when, we kind of just stream everything. The idea of watching something a certain time on a certain evening, that doesn't exist anymore. Except when it comes to Game of Thrones. People are watching it in big groups and they're watching it literally when it airs.
No, it is insane. Well, Miltos, we'll wrap up, but thank you so much for finally coming on the show. I'm so happy we were able to do this.
I'm very happy, and thank you for the questions. They were very, very interesting.
Thank you. Where can people follow you on social media? Like, what are you up to? Like, the stage is yours to kind of plug away.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. I am under my name, Miltos Yerolemou. I'm very easy to find. I interact with people all the time. I'm happy to do that. And and that's where you can find me. I literally, if you're interested in what I'll be up to, I'm doing a theatre piece for the Bristol Old Vic at the end of the year in the UK, Cyrano de Bergerac, in fact. I'm going to be featured in an episode of the new season of The Crown, which will be coming out at the end of the year, I think. And I literally, just last week, I finished filming on the sequel to The Hitman's Bodyguard. So that's going to be a lot of fun, I think, when that finally comes out too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming to the show, and all the best. And hopefully we can have you on again sometime.
Yeah, anytime.
Absolutely.
It will still take a little while to get here. I will be back.
Patience is a virtue. Yeah. So we will wait. Well, this has been Popternative, youtube.com/Popternative for previous episodes. And until next time, this is Miltos and Peter Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.